Good morning from the great state of Louisiana, guys. I talked about this about a month ago, and I finally got a chance to go sit down with Todd Driscoll, Texas Park and Wildlife biologist, regional field biologist, I believe is the correct term. I may have screwed that up again. Sorry, Todd. And we talked about the telemetry study that they're doing on Toledo Bend. So if you don't know, they've implanted fish. I'm doing this without looking at the raw footage, guys. I'm just shooting an opening, but as I recall, they have 26 fish they're currently tracking. They track them every 2 weeks. They got half of them are shallow fish and half of them are deep fish. They're all 16 inches to 8 pounds. So roughly 3 pounds to 8 pounds. And they are seeing some amazingly cool stuff. And one of the things they're trying to do is figure out whether a boat spooks fish. And I think we've got evidence on that. So I believe I've got 8 or 9 parts. I'm gonna post these really quick. I was a lot smarter about how I shot them this time, so the editing's gonna be a lot easier. I'm gonna try to post about 1 or 2, probably 2 a week. So you're gonna get a ton of footage from me over the next few weeks. You're gonna get this, you're gonna get the boat searches. If you haven't seen those yet, I'm searching for a boat and I'm gonna give you fishing reports. So lots of really good stuff. I gotta tell you, this is the most exciting thing I have ever done as a YouTuber. As a fisherman, this is the neatest thing. Getting to hear about not just the 1 or 2 giant fish John Hope was tracking, but what Todd and his partners are doing on Rayburn and on Fork, tracking these fish. So let's dive right in with Mr. Driscoll, and you'll see I get a little impatient. I keep wanting to get to the data, but Todd is a scientist at first and wants to kind of explain to us what they're doing and how they're doing it, which is exactly what he should have done. And it makes a lot more sense once he sets it up the way he does. So this, guys, is really cool. I hope you enjoy it. Please comment, please share. I would love for tons and tons of people to see this. So all those shares and comments are really appreciated. Here we go, guys. All right, boys and girls, Ken Smith, welcome back. We're with Todd Driscoll, Texas Park and Wildlife Department. Thanks for spending some time with us again.
You bet, Ken.
This is a follow-up, forgot my wedding ring. This is a follow-up to our conversation, I guess it may have been a year ago now, where you were talking about y'all were going to start doing a study on Toledo Bend, implanting a transmitter in bass and tracking.
Yes.
So you started this process November of last year?
Yeah, we originally kicked it off in November. And in fact, I think, did we do a video on that, or you and I just talked?
I think it was just before.
Okay. Well, what happened in November was something completely unforeseen. We, well, long story short, between out in the real world at Toledo Bend and at Lake Fork, as well as in the laboratory due to some of the problems we were having, we had 100% mortality of those fish that we implanted transmitters in. We first had the problem out in the field, you know, after we implanted fish and then went to track them for the next 2 to 4 weeks. All of them were dying, which was really a head scratcher. It wasn't only happening at Toledo Bend, but there's Lake Fork's been rolled into this project as well. I don't know if we had talked about that before.
That we haven't talked about it, but you and I have.
But yeah, Lake Fork is part of this package now. So another biologist, Jake Norman at Lake Fork, was experiencing, of course, the same dynamic, which eliminated a specific surgeon, maybe a problem. I mean, 2 different surgeons, 2 different populations of fish. I mean, we had something in common with those mortalities. And what we found out was something that's totally undocumented in the scientific literature. And that's what kind of led us into this problem, so to speak, was it just seemed to be common sense that if biologists wait until the cooler times of the year, we was doing it in November.
Because you did it on purpose in November.
Well, to a point. I mean, part of it was the funding and the planning just kind of rolled into November first off, and then secondly, it's like, well, why wait? I mean, it makes sense now. The water temps are dropping. They were in the low 60s when we did the implantation. It did make perfect sense. We consulted with various other fisheries types around the country that had been that had done telemetry studies before. They didn't see any problem with it. Seemed like it made good sense. Well, colder temperatures and possibly even the declining trend in those temperatures during the fall and November triggered 100% mortality of our fish, and it it turned out it was a fungus infection. It's called saprolignia. Fungus is that gray, fuzzy stuff you see some fish get on sores. That's what killed all of our fish. It was so definitive that that's going to be the next study we jump into. That needs to be documented in the scientific literature to prevent others like us from getting in that scenario, because
Right.
it was, so very rarely in nature do you see such definitive results. In other words, we might have seen 60, 70% mortality in a similar type study and thought that was pretty significant, but this here was 100% mortality of over 30 bass.
And you, if I recall right, you did first in the wild, and then you did it under control here, right, in the tank?
Right, yeah, get into that in a little bit more detail. Out in the field, we started seeing, 30% of the fish dead, 50, 70%.
So real quick, before you go there, talk about how you know they're dying.
Right, the transmitters have a mortality sensor, which means that in a 24-hour period, if there's zero movement, if that transmitter's laying on the bottom or laying on the shoreline, it'll beep a double frequency. So we instantly know when we're out there tracking with the receiver, that mortality beep is double the frequency.
Gotcha.
We instantly know when a fish has died.
So you did it with 25 fish, do I remember right, first go around?
I don't remember the exact numbers. I think with our real world fish and with Jake's fish and the laboratory trials we did, it was well over 30 bass and maybe 40 or 50.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact number, but to that point, 100% mortality. Not 50, not 80, but 100%.
You knew something was up. Yeah.
Big time.
And tell the people the most interesting place you found that there was a transmitter.
We actually, Dan Ash, the assistant biologist, and I, we do all the tracking. And of course, we were out there hunting transmitters after they had died. That wasn't any fun. When they were already dead and hunting a transmitter up in the bushes. Some of them still out in the lake.
So fish wash up, predators grab them.
Exactly. Most of these fish float when they die. They washed up on the shore. You got raccoons and otters and who knows what other scavengers eating them. Some of them we found more than a mile away from the lake. But
how far does it shoot a signal?
Well, in the water, we've got around a mile of detection.
Okay.
Of course, that's what the transmitters are built for. Now, out in the air, it's much greater, but you lose a lot of the directionality, so it becomes much more difficult to find a transmitter out of the water, but you have several miles of detection. Yeah. But in walking through the woods with some of those transmitters, bald eagles are common enough, you'd see a nest or two here and there. And I said, Dan, of course I was half kidding, half serious, it wouldn't surprise me if we might find one of these transmitters up in one of these eagles' nests. I mean, you think about a bass struggling on the surface.
They'll grab him in a heartbeat.
Grab him in a heartbeat, and by God, one of them did. Right there at the mouth of Housing on the south bank, there towards the main lake from Fin and Feather Marina. There's a big eagle's nest right there, and we were tracking in the woods. We kind of got to a sticking point to where, man, we're really close.
Not that way, but not that
way. We walk 100 yards and kind of lose direction. We turn around, walk another 100 yards, and just kind of kept going in circles. And I had the antenna and the headphones and receiver at the time, and out of frustration, I handed it to Dan. I was like, give it a whirl. When I did that, I was just kind of gawking around, looked up, and what do I see? A big eagle's nest. I whistle at Dan. I said, it looks like, what are you talking about? I said, point that antenna up in the sky towards that eagle's nest.
Sure enough.
Sure enough, that's where it was.
I don't guess you climbed up there.
Oh, no, I tried to coerce Dan into getting brave enough to walk up there.
All right, so that shut the study down from November, December, and you decided to do what?
Yeah, we knew that it was the cooler water temperatures. So we decided, well, let's wait until May when water temps are, again, we had these mortalities at low 60s, around 62 degrees. Let's wait till, mid-May, June 1st when the water temps are 75, 80 degrees. So we jumped back into it, and lo and behold, our strong suspicions, they ended up being true. After we got it rolling in May and June, we've just had what you would call expected mortality. You know, putting transmitters in these fish is pretty stressful for the fish. Other studies have shown anywhere from 10 to 30% mortality of the tagged fish, no matter how careful you're being, and that's what we're seeing is around 20 or 25% of mortality of those tagged bass.
Okay. And we talked before we turned the camera on. You experienced 20-ish% natural mortality of a adult fish population every year anyway.
Right, yeah, when you talk about, you can speak to total mortality, total fish mortality, which you can break down into fishing mortality. That's you and I fishing, could be traditional harvest, tournament-related mortality, could be catching immediate release mortality, deep hooking fish, gill hooking fish, all that rolls into fishing mortality.
Okay.
And then outside of that, you just have what you call natural mortality. And obviously fish, like any other wild critter, they just naturally die due to various things, disease, old age, starvation, who knows what. So yeah, you ballpark it for adult bass, nearly all the studies have shown it's around 20 to 25% of adult bass every year are going to die.
Okay. So how many fish do you recall how many you tagged at Toledo?
We had 26 total fish tagged at Toledo Bend.
Size range?
16 inches up to 8 pounds.
Okay.
We got a really good size representation. We got really lucky. You know, sometimes electrofishing during May, June, July, you don't catch a lot of bigger fish, but we really got lucky. I would say, without looking at the data, half of our fish at least are 3.5 plus pounds.
Okay, so fish we want to catch.
Numerous fish, 6 plus, including the biggest at 8 pounds.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and what have you seen on those fish as far as what they're doing, what's the mortality?
Well, I think if we can right now, maybe we back up a little bit and maybe talk about the kind of the rationale, what led us into this study.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's going to be important for folks who can, you know, understand the objectives, what we're trying to find out. You know,
I'm just a bass fisherman. I just want to know what they're doing.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a
Okay.
second. You know, some of it's pretty mundane, but there's some interesting tidbits for sure. We'll get into, but. I'm sure a lot of you diehard, you know, bass anglers remember back, you know, 2014 through 2016 at Toledo Bend. I mean, the fishing was just off the cuff. I mean, we had strong year classes moving through the system.
A lot of giants.
A lot of giants. You know, Bassmaster Magazine had the lake ranked #1 2 years in a row, which I believe is the only lake that's ever happened.
Unreal, yeah.
2015, 2016, #1 ranking. You can imagine. You and I experienced it directly, but you know, the increase in the fishing pressure. We didn't do any surveys through that time. It was just outside of our 4-year rotation of our angler creel surveys. I think we surveyed it in 2015, and then we surveyed it again in 2019. So we didn't exactly document it on paper, but just direct experience. And I mean, there's undoubtedly a big increase in the fishing pressure. And you know, there's various things that can cause, you know, fishing quality to decline, and it certainly has at Toledo Bend. Received a lot of angler complaints over there about the fishing. Our own creel survey showed it declined about 30%. Historically, the average catch rate at Toledo Bend, based on our angler creel surveys, which includes, it's pretty unbiased. I mean, any kind of weather day, good fishing day, bad fishing day. We can interview you, or we can interview the guy that's maybe this is his first day bass fishing. So you got all those factors at play, but bottom line, when you average it all out, historically, the average angler catch rate for bass was about 1 to 1.5 fish per hour of fishing.
Okay, pretty good day, 12, 15 fish.
Yeah, makes sense if you think about it, but it dropped to 0.7 bass per hour in 2019 in our last survey, about 30% drop.
Wow.
Our fish population surveys pretty much showed about the exact same percentage drop in the population.
So you're electroshocking.
Yes.
Okay.
So certainly population numbers can affect fishing quality. That just makes good sense, but I think we'd all agree that fishing pressure also is a big player. And certainly scientific studies prove this out, right? I mean, there's been numerous studies that have proven that bass quickly learn to avoid lures with high fishing pressure. The higher the fishing pressure, the quicker they learn.
Yep. Sam Rayburn's really tough right now, and there's a ton of pressure on him.
So, you know,
got to be something to do with one thing's got to have something to do with the other.
It's been proven that fish learn to avoid lures. So that factor's at play. due to the decline in fishing quality. But we also got to wondering, with all the increase in the fishing pressure, what also increases when fishing pressure increases? Boats. The noise that boats make, the outboard noise, while we're fishing, the trolling motor noise, all that stuff potentially plays into that, and we wondered how might that affect bass behavior. In other words, is it simply the learning, the fish learning, is it simply fish learning to avoid biting a lure, but they still sit there on the same type of habitat and their behavior otherwise does not change? Or is it a twofold confounding effect to where not only do they learn to avoid biting a lure, but the fact that we may have pushed them, or with the advent of the increase in the fishing electronics technology over the last 10 years, what do a lot of us do, especially if there's an offshore bite, if the fish have moved offshore?
I'm looking for them. I want to see them.
Exactly. That does nothing but potentially confound these potential factors we're talking about. So many of us don't even stop and fish on offshore fish unless we see them first.
Right.
Which means that we're idling right over the top of them, maybe 2 or 3 times, and then immediately fishing for those fish right after we're idling over the top of them. So it seemed like a pretty good thing to jump into for just general bass behavior and information to help anglers be more efficient out there. I mean, it's something that really has never been investigated before.
Wow.
I mean, bottom line, what we're doing is we're examining the potential effects of boat, outboard motor noise idling over the top of those fish. If we do that and the fish does not move, of course we record no movement due to the boat and outboard, then we drop back and we fish for that fish. The standard fishing is 10 total casts. We pull back an average distance, casting, like casting a worm in a brush pile, as an example. 30, 40, 50 feet off the fish's location. Mm-hmm. We make 5 casts. The whole time monitoring its behavior with the telemetry receiver and antenna.
I didn't realize you were fishing for them.
If the fish moves, we record it. If it doesn't, then we pull up and replicate what would be like drop shotting or fishing with a jigging spoon.
Wow.
Right on top of it for 5 drops and document all that behavior. So not only are we doing what everyone does in a telemetry study, and the common things are movement, habitat use, and home range, but we're keying all that into how do those factors overlap with angler distribution. In fact, is the bass population and the angling population, are they meshing? Obviously, to catch a fish, you have to be where they're at.
Right.
So we're assessing all that as it relates to those 3 factors. And then beyond that, we're looking at the effects of boat, motor noise, actual fishing, trolling motor noise in presence of a lure on the fish's behavior.
Do you think this might make us all better fishermen?
I think it's going to be pretty informative, in terms of, I've got the numbers here. We've only, we've got, 3-4 months of data in terms of what we're seeing.
Yep.
When we idle over a fish. To me, it's something I've been speculating on since the advent of all the side and down scanning technology, because many times I idle over what I think is a 20, 30 fish school of bass out in 20 or 30 feet of water, spin around, drop the trolling motor, go to fish for them. They're gone. Now, part of me speculates maybe they were white bass, which are just kind of known to be more on the move anyway. But
Pelagic.
Pelagic.
Dang, I learned that term last time I was here. Yeah.
Open water oriented. Yeah. Thought, maybe they're white bass, or maybe they're a big school of yellow bass, maybe overestimated the size, but maybe they were largemouth, and maybe my boat idling spooked them. I think it's something that we all think about, with these high-end
I
electronics.
talk about it all the time. I catch so much flack over it, but yeah, because, and you and I talked about this, everything we know about bass behavior is from the 0.5% of the population in the acre we're fishing that we call, or whatever the small, tiny fraction of fish that we catch. And even on your shocking surveys, you're not shocking up every fish, in a 50-acre space. So the only way to do it is the way you're doing it. Put transmitters in fish that we want to catch, right, tournament-sized fish, and then have the ability to observe them. And now you've in your case, I'm assuming you're probably doing this in your personal boats. You've got the added advantage of the live scope too.
Well, we have a state live scope.
Oh, yeah.
Live scope was purchased as part of the funding for this project, because that's exactly right. The live scope, the Garmin live scope, that live forward sonar gives us the ability to do those things I mentioned about boat, motor noise, and fishing effects. Before that, we really didn't have any way to do it that was cost effective. I mean, there were sonar technologies that were tens of thousands of dollars or more, you know, almost military type grade type stuff that maybe in theory you could have used, but in terms of, you know, consumer level affordable product, what we're doing, about half of our objectives, what we're doing, weren't even possible until the live scope, live forward sonar came about.
All right, so that's part one. Part two will be up here in just a couple days. And as we get to the data, it gets really, really fascinating. Hope you guys are enjoying this series. And I'll put a playlist as video 2 comes up, video 3, video 4. There'll be a playlist you guys can watch and check out what we're doing. Thanks, guys.